Welcome to the Nagrik Podcast with Hari. Since the time of industrialization, right? So all the rich and developed nations, which the entire Western world, US, UK, Australia, Canada, and of course the combination of, let's say, the Western Europe, right? All of these have been essentially, their development has led to the rise in the concentration of, let's say, CO2 in the atmosphere, right? And one thing that we constantly see, whether it's in the different climate pacts, agreements, and so on, that all of these rich nations are still not, let's say, uh, taking the responsibility, number one, or number two, even acknowledging the fact that, let's say, the next stage of the development, or let's say the financing of the new technologies, should be primarily driven through these countries. What do you think needs to happen? Are these acts, agreements, are they able to, in a way, use the historical inconsistencies that have led to the current challenges? And are these different collaboration efforts that we have in place today, the different governance structures that we have in place today, are they able to, use this particular historical fact and ensure that the developing nations are not just provided with different financing techniques, but also the developed world takes care of the development of the new technologies? Like, what do you have to say on this?
It's a very complex issue, right? And there are no right or wrong answers to that. But I must say that if you look at the Paris Agreement, it has attempted to bring countries on a common platform, right? First is it's very difficult to pinpoint exact responsibility, right? Undoubtedly, the whole problem has been caused by the developed world. I think there's no debate on that. But what percentage share, you know, uh, nobody is able to really say that with any certainty, right? But one of the good things that the Paris Agreement did was it had a clause called common but differentiated responsibilities, right? See, we are in a situation that uh, or climate change is not an individual problem. It's a global problem, right? Carbon dioxide or any greenhouse gas emitted here goes up in the air, mixes and travels everywhere. So, like what you mentioned earlier, the butterfly effect, if I'm emitting carbon dioxide, it could go and cause a storm, metaphorically speaking, in Timbuktu, right? Uh, Now, anybody could get harmed, right? So, what the Paris Agreement said, we recognize that one, different countries have contributed differently to this problem. It said we also recognize that every country does not have the same capability or cannot afford to kind of now invest in addressing this problem, right? So they said, countries, you go and do your homework and come back to tell us how much contribution can you make in terms of reduction of the greenhouse gases. They put a target there that in order to maintain uh, life on Earth the way we are used to, we should not go above 2 degrees centigrade compared to the pre-industrial levels, right? Because if it goes, then it may become uncontrollable or maybe uncomfortable. Now, if this is the target, there was a carbon budget worked out that we need to reduce overall the emissions and the stock of carbon by this much. You come and tell us. So each country went, they saw how much could they afford, what could they do, and came back, right? And those became what are called the NDCs, or the nationally determined contributions. These are all voluntary. So each country has promised something and hopefully are working towards it. There are two things to it, right? One is that if you the target that the countries have taken, you can break it down into two. One, which they can achieve without any external help, right? It's within our means to do it, we will do it. The second is they say that we need external help, both in terms of technology and in financing, right? Which is where the tussle is going on, right? The developing world is saying if you want us to meet those targets, then please make money and technology available. And the developed world has been slow uh, and miser, if I can say, in loosening its purse strings, right? They've been attempting. First, it was 100 billion. They had to contribute, reach to a contribution level of 100 billion per year by 2022. They barely met it. In fact, probably there was some gap in it. And then in this COP, they were to present what is called the NCQT, which was the new funding they would provide. While the developing world was asking for 1.3 trillion, uh, the developed world has offered 300 billion, and that too over a period of a decade. So obviously there is a lot of gap here. But I personally think it's not very easy to extract money from the rich nations, right? They also have their parliaments or their governments and their electorate to face, why are you giving out money and things like that. And the the developing world must kind of continue to press them to get this, because only then we'll be able to handle the problem. But what I wanted to say is that we should continue on the path of transitioning our energy, decarbonizing our system, our industry, and whatever else is within our means. And I say this because, as we said, climate can strike anywhere. The climate calamity. I really wish it doesn't strike anywhere. But let's say if it strikes in the developed world, they have the money, they have the technology, they have the systems to take care of it. If it strikes in the developing world, we have none. We have only nature to look to. So therefore, we must kind of do our bit to make sure that we are not disturbing this whole cycle of nature by putting up more and more greenhouse gases. We should start kind of reducing them on our own anyway.
Interesting. So you say that, let's say, from a responsibility standpoint, definitely, the developed world has been a little hesitant in providing the financing and the technology, but still the imperative is on the developing countries as well, because let's say the downside effects of climate mishappenings is going to be even more brutal for the developing nations because of lack of systems, lack of financing, and the inability to, let's say, provide resources to their citizens. And again, I think time and again we've seen that when events like this happen, some form of aid is definitely provided by the developed world, but most likely all these events eventually lead to, let's say, from a short to medium term perspective, a significant decline in the standard of life, right, in all these places.
There's no point crying over spilt milk. If damage happens and then you provide aid, rather than that, prepone the whole thing and provide resources so that you don't have to provide the aid.
I think this entire thing is definitely, if you look at it from a lens of, let's say, proactive, reactive thing, right? The climate has become a thing where you just constantly reacting to the different, negative events that are happening. Whereas the world is, let's say, less inclined to proactively put systems, places, financing before, so that even if these events happen, the the eventual impact reduces. But
The whole idea is, it's a three-pronged approach to address climate. It's mitigation, where you reduce the emissions per se, or you nip the evil in the bud. The second is adaptation, that should something happen, you prepare the society, you prepare the systems, the processes, so that we are able to take care of it, so that the impact can be reduced. And the third is loss and damage. That should any calamity happen, we are in a position to get help and aid to them very quickly. So these are called sequential bullets in our arsenal, because the more we invest in mitigation, the less will be the need for adaptation, right? The more we invest in adaptation, the less will be the need for loss and damage. And the more we invest in loss and damage, lesser will be the human suffering. And that's our objective. That's our ultimate aim, that human suffering should not be there. So, if we kind of pull the investments all up front and start putting in mitigation and adaptation, I think we'll be in better shape.